3 cases of teens who set churches ablaze. Church, a place of gathering that was founded to teach and to learn about a religion. For some, this place is less of a building and more of a body to house and unite believers in worship. Churches assist in facilitating peace, fostering spirituality, and providing a safe space for prayer and community. However, in these cases, these teens sought to destroy those very places that were meant to harbor peace. They made the conscious decision to burn these buildings down to smoke and ash, turning them into glorified bonfires. Fire represents many things: rebirth and destruction, passion and anger, hope and hell. It is even used as a form of communication and to send messages. Whether the intent was to disrupt tranquility and metastasize hate, send a message to those they oppose, or to just satisfy an urge to ravage and ignite something, can be left up to debate. Once we get through these cases, let me know what you think. Case 1. It's Ruckersville, Virginia on August 22nd, 2010. Supposedly, at around 2 o'clock in the morning, a neighbor woke up to a dog barking. They grew curious and agitated as to why the dog kept barking and went to investigate. While searching for the cause of the dog's noisiness, they discovered a glowing red building in the distance and immediately dialed 911. Firefighters arrived on the scene shortly after. Upon examination of the fire, authorities determined that the path of burning was quite unnatural, signifying that the fire was undoubtedly set intentionally. Church member and wife of Ruckersville's volunteer fire department chief called the police exclaiming, "Our church is on fire." Shortly after the call, the pastor arrived at around 3 on that Sunday morning. His eyes were met with the building he was so familiar with taking a different appearance. He saw smoke pouring from every crack of the church and firefighters sawing a hole in the roof. Later that morning, other members of the church arrived. With smoke still emitting and smoldering the air in the vicinity, they gathered in prayer. The sheriff reported that 18-year-old Sean Heiderscheit of Barboursville, Virginia, and a 17-year-old Ruckersville native are responsible for setting the fire. A few days later, the pastor made efforts to reach out to the suspects' families. The families deeply apologized on behalf of them and promised to be at the worship service the coming Sunday morning. No one from the church knew either of the teenage boys, and the pastor believes it was just random meanness. Neither of the teens pleaded guilty. However, investigators say both admitted to being at the church, but blame each other for setting the fire. Case 2. On May 20th, 2012, in Acton, Virginia, a late-night driver passed by a church at around 1 o'clock in the morning. The driver drove by the new Holy Deliverance Outreach Ministry when they noticed the building was radiating, with smoke rising and proliferating. The passerby called 911 and informed the dispatcher that the church was on fire. A little after the call, firefighters showed up to see the church completely engulfed in a fury of scarlet tendrils. On that Sunday morning, authorities had 2 prime suspects. 2 teenage boys were accused of setting fire to religious property. 17-year-old John Claude Bridges, along with an undisclosed 16-year-old. With pyroforensics, or fire investigations, the cause of fire is analyzed intensively. Factors such as the building's wiring, the weather climate, residue and debris, and even the burn pattern present on structures help determine the cause of the fire. The fire marshal's office determined the fire was set deliberately and was indeed an act of arson. On the 29th, the teens were charged with 3 felonies: breaking and entering with intent to commit arson, arson of a meeting place, and grand larceny. The boys were held in a juvenile detention facility with no bond. Now, let's jump about 8 months in the future to January 8th, 2013. The now 18-year-old John Claude pleaded guilty to charges relating to setting fire to the church. Prior to pleading guilty this morning, the court granted the government's motion to transfer John Claude to adult status for criminal prosecution, meaning that although at the time he was 17 and his accomplice was 16, he would be tried as an adult in a court of law. This was a predominantly black church. John Claude was accused that this fire setting was an intentional act of arson, and that it was deliberately carried out because of the church's demographic. John Claude pleaded guilty to this accusation and admitted that he burned down the New Holy Deliverance Outreach Ministry because of the race, color, and ethnic characteristics of his congregants, making this an admitted hate crime. The teenager now faces a maximum possible penalty of up to 20 years in prison and or a fine of up to $250,000. On Thursday, May 2, 2013, about 4 months after John Claude pleaded guilty, he was ultimately sentenced to serve 2 years in prison, 2 years of supervised release, in order to pay $141,773.68 in restitution. Information regarding the accomplice is lacking as they were 16 at the time of the crime. Brief psychology behind arson. In a study conducted by researchers, acts of arson are most commonly committed by the age groups of late adolescence to early adulthood, as is the case with all of the transgressions we're going to be discussing today. But why is this? Why is it so common for this age group to set fires to buildings? In adolescence, there is a spike in risk-taking behavior. This may be related to immaturity of the frontal lobes. The prefrontal cortex is also commonly linked to self-control and decision-making, which is also undergoing intensive development during adolescence. Adolescents are also susceptible to the personal fable. The personal fable is defined as the belief that our feelings and ideas are special, and we are invulnerable and invincible. This idea also encompasses the thought that no harm or consequence would happen when we engage in risky behavior, like getting into an accident from hitting 100 on the back roads, or getting into trouble for incinerating buildings. Case 3. This last case happened this summer, just a few months ago in June of 2022. Braxton, 18, and James, 19, along with an undisclosed minor, are the suspects. Please keep in mind that these individuals have yet to face a sentence hearing, as this incident is relatively recent, and there may be more information regarding this case in the future. With that being said, on the night of June 25th, 2022, an anonymous complaint was received. Allegedly, a group of people were being an annoyance with extreme noise levels and were drinking and partying at the St. Coleman Roman Catholic Church. On the morning of June 26th, the burning building was discovered by neighbors. Alongside this, a can of Natty Daddy was found near the premises. Troopers made contact with James and the undisclosed minor, and the two accused Braxton of lighting a set of plastic flowers on fire, putting them in the middle of the church, and covering them with a pew before leaving. James and the minor also showed investigators a video of the group drinking beer on the way to the church. Braxton is accused of lighting a fire in the church after the party ended, court records say. He is charged with first-degree arson and conspiracy. A person is guilty of arson in the first degree when the person intentionally damages a building by starting a fire or causing an explosion, and when the person knows that another person, not an accomplice, is present in the building at the time, or the person knows of circumstances which render the presence of another person, not an accomplice, therein a reasonable possibility. Warrants were issued for the arrest of Braxton and James shortly after, and they are currently being held in the Southern Regional Jail on $75,000 cash bonds. The bishop thanked investigators for their efforts. He was in disbelief of this whole situation and deeply hurt. James is charged with conspiracy and accessory after the fact. A third male juvenile was also charged with arson and conspiracy and is being held in a juvenile detention center, according to authorities. Upon finding out it was an act of arson, the bishop expressed the sadness this has brought to the community. These teens intended to destroy this historic structure, which is important to the lives of many. From a data point taken from 2012 within the United States, over 62,000 acts of arson are committed annually. In all of these cases, there are no known reported physical injuries or fatalities. Now, Let's jump back to how setting a fire is only considered arson if it is intended. In every one of these cases, the fire started or was found on a Sunday. As such, after determining the suspects, it would be quite difficult for them to claim the fire was set unintentionally, given the fact the fires were set and discovered on a day people more commonly attend church. Outside of this, pyroforensics, or determining the cause of the fire, also plays a huge role in figuring out just how the fire was started and what was used to ignite the buildings. Pyromania is a psychiatric disorder described as an individual engaging in an impulsive and intentional pathological fire setting. In the United States, it is estimated that just 1% of adults meet the criteria for pyromania, and 2.4% to 3.5% for adolescents. So, do you think acts of arson should be excused in a court of law if the inflictor has been previously diagnosed with pyromania? It is a possibility that some may seek out psychiatric help in hopes of having a scapegoat and excuse for their malice-intended acts. In the last case, where individuals were partying at the church, why do you think the fire was set? To hide evidence of the party? Something happened at the party that led them to ignite the location in retaliation? Or do you think it was something else entirely? If you enjoyed this video, make sure you leave a thumbs up and subscribe. Let me know what you think of these cases and matters surrounding arson in general. Thanks for watching. Keep it real.